When's the last time a video or headline has caught your attention, making you think something very significant is about to happen? Whether it be a great war or economic collapse. It seems every week there's some seemingly world-changing event taking place. Something that sparks speculation of World War III, tyranny, or societal collapse. And just when you think something's gonna happen, nothing happens. You see, whenever I come across some crazy speculation, I just check in on my happening guy, who takes a quick look at his happening watch, and well, would you look at the time? Nothing. This guy right here is the Nothing Ever Happens Chud, otherwise known as the Happening Chud. You probably know him by his signature line, "Nothing ever happens." It also happens to be his entire philosophical worldview. Usually anytime you see the Happening Chud, he's in a meme, either telling us he was right all along or predicting the future. The crazy thing is, he's always right. Every time you think something is about to happen, nothing happens, and the Happening Chud is right again. I'm not gonna lie, he makes me genuinely angry inside. He makes all of us angry, but he's always right, and you can't ignore that. I mean, that's why he sparks this unsettling curiosity in us. It's not just this silly little internet meme or joke, it's an entire philosophy on the world itself, and one that always ends up being correct. To quickly elaborate on his philosophy, I have to separate it into two categories. The most widely known understanding of the Happening Chud meme, and the deeper existential philosophy he's created. On the surface, the Happening Chud meme can be condensed into this. Over the last 80 years, nothing significant has happened. You see, nothing truly changes us as a society. Sure, technology progresses and life becomes safer, but generally speaking, in terms of societal change, the world has gone quiet. Almost stale. Human conflict, for the most part, when looking at the rest of history, has reached a standstill. From the perspective of the Happening Chud, our world has stopped making meaningful progress in its institutions, culture, economy, and ideas. To sum it up, the world has fallen into civilizational stagnation. But the deeper meaning behind the Nothing Ever Happens Chud is something much more terrifying. Not just that the world has ceased to create meaningful progress, but rather that despite all of humanity's effort, the world has truly never made any meaningful progress in the first place. Despite all the history of wars, revolutions, ideologies, and social institutions, the real core foundations of humanity haven't changed at all. We're still the same people that existed hundreds and even thousands of years ago, just in a different environment. The deeper meaning behind the Nothing Ever Happens Chud is that human nature isn't changing, so in that regard, nothing is happening. As nihilistic and cynical as his world is, if you look at history, he's right. We do the same things over and over again. Everything repeats, and in the end, it's seemingly all for nothing. It's like what Nietzsche spoke about. There's these deeper properties inside of us, these inseparable properties of human nature. He described one as the will to power. He argued that the harder we try to push it away, the more destructive it comes back. Essentially, no matter how hard we push human nature away, it always reasserts itself. And human nature is this sort of inescapable mystery. And the Nothing Ever Happens Chud is sort of an answer to the mystery. He simply states that nothing is going to happen, so don't waste your time believing it's going to. And within that meaning is this terrifying reality that he's kind of right. If you look closely at the world, empires rise and fall, ideologies develop and decline, and our values cycle through this endless loop that always leads us back to where we first began. It's like the world is a series of chess games being played over and over again, and after every single game, all the pieces from the pawn to the king return to their original positions. But even now, after I've told you everything, after I've given my own explanations of the deeper meaning behind the Nothing Ever Happens Chud, I still don't feel like I'm giving you the entire picture. I'd like to read a couple quotes from Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. Although on a conscious level a man lives for himself, he is actually being used as an unconscious instrument for the attainment of humanity's historical aims. And there's this one too. Kings are slaves of history. History, the amorphous, unconscious life within the swarm of humanity, exploits every minute in the lives of kings as an instrument for the attainment of its own ends. While Tolstoy isn't supporting the happening Chud's philosophy here, he is expanding on the idea that we, on an individual level, have no power across history. And if it doesn't change as the happening Chud suggests, then there is truly nothing we can do. And this, I believe, really connects with the hopelessness and despair of the Nothing Ever Happens Chud. So naturally, we want a solution to this. Like I said earlier, we do want to stop this Chud. Because after all, I think we can all agree, due to the extremely nihilistic nature of this worldview, it is incredibly dangerous to us at an individual level. I think the most interesting and viable solutions to us come from more philosophical ideologies. Mostly because they already argue against the same ideas that the Nothing Ever Happens Chud presents. They're already trying to solve this problem. I think rationalism is the best one to begin with. Rationalism states that this entire cynical worldview that nothing ever happens is simply an illusion created by perspective. Rationalism concludes that things do happen, time moves, and things change. It ignores the human nature rabbit hole by saying that we're just a cog in a machine of nature itself, and that cog is spinning actively. So things are happening. It focuses on the more literal sense of things happening to dismiss nothing happening. The problem with rationalism, however, is that it's framing the problem incorrectly. Facts don't answer existential questions. Rationalists can explain how things work, but they don't explain why they matter. The existential ache we have survives logical arguments. Essentially, the rationalist argument doesn't accept existential meaning, and because of that, it can't argue against the deeper meaning of nothing ever happening because it refuses to acknowledge it. But what about Stoicism? Stoicism says to stop worrying about history and the future. It says to not concern yourself with nothing happening because it's out of your domain, and instead to focus on your inner character and virtue. The Stoics would say, why worry that nothing happens in this world when it's outside of your control? The problem with Stoicism's solution? Stoics assume that virtue is the highest good. Virtue relies on courage and justice, but if nothing ever happens, then what obligation to these principles do we have? Why is courage better than cowardice and justice better than injustice? It doesn't have answers to these questions because it says our purpose is virtue and there's nothing we can do to affect the world, but it can't answer the question, what if we have no purpose? With all of these existential questions popping up, I'll go over existentialism. Existentialism proposes to create meaning anyway. Nothing ever happens, create meaning anyway. It says that if nothing ever happens and things are truly meaningless, then create your own meaning. The problem with this is quite obvious. Why should self-created meaning matter if nothing else does? If the very idea of meaning itself is objective and the world itself is meaningless, like the happening Chud suggests, then wouldn't creating self-created meaning simply be absurd make-believe? Speaking of absurdity, absurdism gives probably the most interesting solution, and even though it's similar to existentialism, I prefer it to all the others I mentioned. Absurdism says to not just acknowledge the problem, but accept it and keep living. An absurdist would say, yes, nothing ever happens Chud might be right, history repeats itself, nothing lasts, and you die, but just go lay out under the sun in the grass and enjoy life. The problem with absurdism is that choosing to be happy despite the absurdity of life doesn't make it any less absurd, and the problem still remains. The issue with each of these solutions is that they have to distract you from the problem. Pretending this massive dilemma isn't real or isn't important doesn't get rid of the existential itch we have inside. The problem I have with these solutions is the same problem I have with the Nothing Ever Happens Chud. They produce produce this standstill inside of us, this paralyzing freeze. This contemplation of thought can go on for eternity. Some philosophers, like the Stoics, say that you have no control over these thoughts and fears, so focus on something else. But it doesn't actually fix anything. The solution can't just be to ignore it all. I think the solution has to be a question we ask ourselves individually. After all, I think this is an incredibly individualistic problem. And that question, I think, has to be what we're going to do about it. It has to be based around action rather than thought. And I think the general nature of this specific controversy is healthy. People like me don't like the happening Chud. He's hated. And in my opinion, we should hate him. This idea that we're trapped inside a world that no matter how hard we try to change always reverts back to its own ways is so nihilistic that we should want to question it. Rather than accepting, ignoring, or denying that nothing ever happens Chud, we're questioning him. And in that questioning, we have to question ourselves and ask ourselves how we can solve a world that seemingly doesn't change.